Hi, this is Michelle from Line Art Studio, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about this painting I did, in particular how I add the water. To start with, I just laying down the foundations, a bit of an underpainting. I like to do this sometimes, depending on the skin tones. It the bright colours come through and it makes the skin tone richer at the end of it. So I lay down these colours according to zones where I feel the light's going to be. Reds or reds and pinks I typically use on the nose, the cheeks, the lips. Blues around the eyes, yellows in the lighter areas like the forehead and the cheeks, blues and greens, purples even. I'll use around the jaw, especially for a man because he has a beard. And even if he doesn't have a beard, he has that 5 o'clock shadow going on usually. Yeah, so I do this. I lay down these colours and just start blocking it in a bit. I'm thinking about where the light's going to come from. And now I begin to lay other colours, more flesh tones, over the top. Sometimes I'll go a bit heavier handed. It doesn't matter because you can just knock the opacity back on the layer. So it doesn't worry me doing that. We're painting in digital, so use it to your advantage. Here I've dropped the layer onto the underpainting and I did knock the opacity back, and I think I actually changed it to an overlay just to get a really nice rich tone. Yeah, overlay, and then I dropped it onto the underpainting, sorry, is what I mean. Now I'm beginning to establish a little bit of the beard. This is my lash brush from my Procreate portrait set. It's a single pixel inking brush, really. But I use it a lot for not only lashes and hair and that sort of thing. I use it for anywhere where I want a nice sharp line, a nice defined line. Okay, now this is where I start to paint the water. First I go in with the multiply layer and I lay the shadows. With water, there's always a bit of a shadow, and water darkens the skin underneath. You can see I'm doing it in the background, which I'll get rid of that later because I won't really need it, but it's just giving me a good base for where I'm establishing the water drops and things. Now I'm going in with another layer and just adding some lighter tones. Because water is just so reflective, but it blends and it changes the colours underneath. So it has in areas it has a milky sort of a luminance to it. I've changed it to an add layer, so it's become really, really bright. But now I'm going through with an eraser on a low opacity, so the eraser's not on full opacity, and just knocking back little areas so there'll be a gradual gradient down into the end of the water drop, which is where your heaviest opaqueness is. Another layer, and these are highlights. Again, this is my lash brush. It's a beautiful inking brush, and it just gives me those nice hard lines that I want. This is one of my blocking brushes, one of the texture blocking brushes. Again, another layer, Just adding some diversity, some happy accidents basically, to make it look a bit more natural with what's going on. I'm changing these layers, I'm changing the layer mode sometimes, I'm knocking the opacities back, I'm trialling, it's all trial and error to get the look that I'm wanting. Now I'm going in with the dark reflections in the water. Water is it just reflects everything, and it will pick up on any colours, and there's a lot of black in this, so it is picking up on this black and the darker tones, and it's reflecting it into the water drops. I'm picking and choosing which ones. I want to keep the majority of the most distinct and hard edge water, defined water, around his nose and his eyes. That's where my focal point is, and that's where the highest contrasting water drops will be. The ones in the background and the ones on the right side of his face won't have as high a contrast, because that's away from it's peripheral. It's not the focal point. You can hear me, you can see me turning layers on and off when you can see it flickering. And now I'm going back in with some more highlights. Just take your time, and I'll add and I'll delete. I'm just finding the light basically, and where the light's going to touch it and reflect against it. It's just building these water drops, really, sculpting them almost. I'll also do a little bit of blending. I'll blend some of the areas that I painted just to give it a milky luminance to it. Back in with the beard and just adding more. I like to build these things slowly. This is a very, very close up of the beard, so normally I get away with using a brush with multiple hairs in it, but it's so close up, and beards, they have a really hard, wiry sort of hairs, and they don't blend together. They're like steel wool. They sort of separate, and they're very wiry. And being so close in this illustration, I have to show that. It's no good going in and painting it in, blocking it in with a big brush and not having the definition of the individual hairs, because it'll look ridiculous, to be honest. It's fine if it's at a distance, but not this close up. I have given it a bit of a base with some darker colour, but you'll see I'll build layers and layers of the hairs. Trial and error. Sorry. Oh, pardon me, very tired. It's like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock here in Australia, 2 a.m. This is one of the brushes in my pack I was using then. It's like a beard brush. Creates little speckly 5 o'clock shadow effects, but I got rid of that. It didn't look right. Okay. Okay, now I'm adding more shadows. The actual defined shadows on a multiply layer beneath the individual drops, and just giving them a shadow, the ones that I really want to define. Because like everything else, water does cast a shadow. And now the really bright highlights starting to get in and really define these water drops, make them stand out and bring them to life. Find yourself a bunch of references too. It's really helpful. Really great close-up macro photography and things. And you can really see how water does accumulate, and a lot of the drops, they're very repetitive in nature, very repetitive in their shapes. You'll have a long drop, and then there'll be that tear on the bottom of it, that round teardrop right on the end. It's basically how water runs and accumulates. I just used a clipping mask on top of the hair, the facial hair, and I added some grey hairs, but also some water, some condensation on the actual hairs, because water does stick to the individual hairs. I love clipping masks, by the way. They are just one of the best inventions ever. They make life so much easier. It's less time consuming. You don't have to worry about staying within the lines and staying within the, trying to do this, for instance, on the individual hairs would be very time consuming if I had to paint every single one carefully to make sure it was actually on the hair. But clipping masks, they just make that all so simple. Procreate I'm using, by the way, if I haven't told you. I'm mad about Procreate. I just think it's a super app. I love my iPad. I've just got an iPad Pro 12.9 inch. It's an older version, one of the earlier ones, the pre-2018 one. But it works fine. And Procreate, I can't rave enough about Savage. They really listen to consumers, and they just step it up. Every single time there's an update, there's new tools that are just, they're the absolute fundamentals that we need, the basic tools that we as illustrators will use all the time. Last time they added the warp, and I believe this time there's some wonderful new things coming out. Being able to float the various menus or palettes, the colour wheel, that's such an advantage for me, because I have a set workflow on my Cintiq. I have a big Cintiq in my studio, and I like to set it a certain way, which I might be able to do that now with the new Procreate that's coming out, which would be really nice, because it's nice to keep that workflow from one program to the next. I mainly use Corel Painter and Photoshop on my Cintiq, and pretty much Procreate on my iPad. I really don't use anything else. They give me all I need. And you can see me, I'm just adding more highlights, finishing off the lips. I'm not really talking about what I'm doing in the portrait. You can see all my other portraits. I've talked about my process there before. This is really just about the water. I had so many people asking me if I could do a tutorial on it. I just thought I'd do this for now, but I will do a much more in-depth one for you guys and really focus on it and go about painting individual drops from start to finish. But at the moment I'm very, very busy, not only with my own work, but my daughter's studying nursing and she's got 2 kids, so I need to help her at the moment. She's been going through exams, so just need to help look after the kids and all of that while she's studying. Just finishing off the beard, the facial hair, adding highlights to the skin. Add, delete, add, delete. That's pretty much what I do. And I use my portrait brush set for this. That's all I really use. I don't use any other brushes really. Occasionally I might use a couple, but the majority of the time it's just this one set. I am, however, making a new set of fur and hair brushes, which hopefully I'll be able to release soon. I've just got to refine it a little bit more. Nearly finished. I'm just adding a little bit more condensation, some highlights, just with a little scatter brush. Those little tiny water drops that catch here and there to give it some authenticity. Last minute highlights and touches. And that's pretty much my process. Thanks for watching. See ya.